The year was 1805. Europe was engulfed in conflict as Napoleon Bonaparte's French Empire was rising to new heights. While many considered him a military genius, others feared him as a conqueror who threatened the balance of power across the continent. But nothing would cement Napoleon's legacy quite like the Battle of Austerlitz, his greatest victory. Often referred to as the Battle of the Three Emperors, Austerlitz saw Napoleon take on the combined forces of the Russian Empire and the Austrian Empire. What unfolded was a masterclass in strategic warfare, where deception, speed, and audacity culminated in a decisive victory. But how did it all happen? Let's break it down, from the context of the war to the brilliant strategy that led Napoleon to one of the most famous victories in military history. To understand Austerlitz, we first need to look at Europe in 1805. The continent was at a tipping point. Napoleon, fresh from his successful campaigns in Italy and Egypt, had crowned himself Emperor of the French in 1804. This act of self-crowning angered the European monarchs, who feared his ambitions for a continental empire. The Third Coalition, consisting of Britain, Austria, Russia, and later Prussia, formed to challenge Napoleon's dominance. But despite their combined might, their coordination was lacking. Meanwhile, Napoleon had already demonstrated his military brilliance in previous battles, and the armies of Europe were well aware of the threat he posed. By the fall of 1805, Napoleon had launched a bold campaign across Central Europe, rapidly advancing through Austria. After capturing Vienna, Napoleon set his sights on the combined Russian and Austrian forces, who were marching towards him. The stage was set for what would become one of the most famous battles in history. Napoleon was a master of military deception. Before Austerlitz, he implemented a strategy that would lure his enemies into a trap. Knowing that the Russian and Austrian armies were eager to crush his seemingly weakened forces, he deliberately appeared vulnerable. His army of 73,000 men was outnumbered by the 85,000 troops of the Allies. It was a classic David versus Goliath situation, but Napoleon was far from being a helpless underdog. Napoleon intentionally weakened his right flank and positioned his troops in a way that suggested he was on the defensive, retreating to preserve his army. This bait worked perfectly. The Allies, confident that they had Napoleon cornered, rushed to seize the opportunity. But what the Allies didn't realize was that Napoleon had carefully chosen the battlefield. The plains near Austerlitz, with its low hills and foggy mornings, were ideal for the kind of battle he wanted to fight. Every move he made was a calculated part of his grand plan to envelop and destroy the enemy. On one side stood Napoleon's Grande Armée, an army known for its speed, discipline, and innovative tactics. Napoleon had transformed the French army into one of the most efficient fighting machines of the era. His soldiers were well-trained, highly motivated, and capable of executing complex maneuvers quickly. Opposing him were the forces of Tsar Alexander I of Russia and Holy Roman Emperor Francis II of Austria. Though numerically superior, the Allies were poorly coordinated, and their commanders were often at odds over the strategy. The Russian general, Kutuzov, favored a more cautious approach, while others pushed for an immediate offensive. In contrast, Napoleon had a unified command and the ability to adapt quickly to changes on the battlefield. His marshals, including Davout, Soult, and Murat, were among the most capable in Europe, and they would play crucial roles in the battle that was about to unfold. Chapter 4. The battle begins. The fog of war. The Battle of Austerlitz began in the early morning of December 2, 1805, under a thick fog that covered the battlefield. This fog would prove to be one of Napoleon's greatest allies. His troops were concealed, while the Allies, overconfident and eager to exploit Napoleon's supposed weakness, moved to attack. The Allies made their first push against the French right flank, exactly as Napoleon had hoped. The Russian and Austrian forces advanced through the fog, thinking they had the upper hand, unaware that they were walking into a trap. Napoleon's center, appearing weak, was poised to deliver the crushing blow. Chapter 5. The Grand Decoy, Napoleon's Genius. Napoleon had set the perfect trap. As the Allies committed more and more forces to attack his right flank, Napoleon prepared for a decisive counterattack in the center. By around 9 a.m., the fog began to lift, revealing that the Allied forces had stretched themselves thin across the battlefield. Napoleon gave the order for his troops to strike. Marshal Soult's Fourth Corps, which had been hidden in the center, launched a ferocious attack on the Pratzen Heights. the key high ground that the Allies had taken earlier. The assault was swift and devastating. The Allies, caught off guard, scrambled to defend their position, but it was too late. Napoleon's forces broke through their center, cutting the Allied army in half. This move was the turning point of the battle. While the Allies were still trying to figure out what had gone wrong, Napoleon's reserves poured into the breach, overwhelming the disorganized enemy forces. The French troops moved with precision and speed, while the Allies, caught in confusion, were unable to mount an effective counterattack. Chapter 6. The center collapses. With the Allied center collapsing, the battlefield descended into chaos for the Russian and Austrian troops. French cavalry under Murat swept across the field, harassing the retreating soldiers, while Napoleon's infantry pushed forward relentlessly. The fog had lifted completely by now, and the sun shone down on what was becoming a clear French victory. This moment, often referred to as the Sun of Austerlitz, symbolized Napoleon's triumph and became part of the legend surrounding the battle. In a matter of hours, the battle had swung decisively in favor of the French. The once formidable Allied army was now in disarray. Napoleon's strategy of dividing and conquering had worked to perfection, and the French forces continued their advance, driving the enemy from the field. Chapter 7. The Pursuit and Aftermath. By late afternoon, the battle was over. The Allies were in full retreat, with thousands of their soldiers dead, wounded, or captured. Napoleon's forces pursued the fleeing troops, ensuring that the defeat would be total. The Allied army had lost over 36,000 men, while the French suffered around 9,000 casualties, a staggering difference that highlighted the effectiveness of Napoleon's strategy. The aftermath of Austerlitz had far-reaching consequences. The Austrian Empire was forced to sign the Treaty of Pressburg, which ceded significant territory to France and effectively dissolved the Holy Roman Empire. The Third Coalition collapsed, and for a time Napoleon's dominance over Europe seemed unchallenged. Chapter 8. Legacy of Austerlitz. The Battle of Austerlitz is often considered Napoleon's greatest victory, and for good reason. His ability to manipulate the battlefield, deceive his enemies, and strike at the perfect moment was a testament to his military genius. But beyond the tactical brilliance, Austerlitz demonstrated Napoleon's larger strategic vision. By defeating two of Europe's great powers in a single battle, he had effectively reshaped the political landscape of the continent. Austerlitz also cemented Napoleon's reputation as one of history's greatest military commanders. His soldiers revered him, and his enemies feared him. For years to come, the mere mention of Austerlitz would inspire awe and terror in equal measure. But like all great victories, Austerlitz was not the end of the story. While Napoleon's star was at its zenith after the battle, his ambitions would eventually lead to overreach and downfall. Yet for one brief moment in history, on a foggy field near the village of Austerlitz, Napoleon was truly the master of Europe. If you found this breakdown of the Battle of Austerlitz insightful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into historical battles and military strategies. What battle should we cover next? Let us know in the comments below.